Welcome to our podcast, where we dive into the fascinating world of animals. We cover it all: wildlife conservation and unique species to ethical care practices and animal behavior. Whether you're an animal lover, a pet owner, or just curious about the natural world, join us for insightful discussions, expert interviews, and fun facts about the creatures we share our planet with. Please tune in and discover something new about the incredible animals surrounding us.
Okay, so get this. Today's deep dive, we're going to be all up in the meticulous world of lab animal care. Like really getting into it, with the gold standard, the guide for the care and use of laboratory animals, no less.
Yeah, published by the National Academy of Sciences.
No light reading, that's for sure.
Not at all. This guide, it's the authority for anyone, and I mean anyone, involved in research using animals.
So you're interested in these standards, so listeners, trust me, this deep dive, it's going to be eye-opening.
Yeah.
We're going behind the scenes, like way behind the scenes, to uncover what it takes to ensure that these animals, they're having like the best possible lives.
Right.
Even while they're, part of important research.
And it's important to understand, it's not just about being nice to the animals, although, obviously that's a big part of it.
Of course.
But humane care, it's fundamentally linked to getting accurate, trustworthy scientific results.
It's all connected.
It really is, in a way most people wouldn't expect.
I got to tell you, before we even get into it, one fact from this guide, it totally floored me.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know, at the top of a standard rodent cage, the ones you see in labs, the light intensity can be 80 times. 80. Stronger than at the bottom.
80 times.
Wow.
80 times.
Imagine you're a research animal experiencing that kind of intense light variation, right? It'd be incredibly disorienting.
Oh, absolutely.
Stressful, right?
Yeah.
And not to mention inconsistencies like that, they could totally throw off research data.
Oh, for sure.
Especially for studies on, say, vision or even behavior.
Talk about a confounding variable. It's wild how these little things can have such a huge impact, and this guide, it does not let those details slide.
No, absolutely not. And this 8th edition, the one we're diving into today, it was put together by a real crack team of experts, veterinarians, researchers, ethicists, you name it.
Wow, a real brain trust. They weren't messing around. They really wanted to ensure that all these different perspectives were taken into account.
And get this might surprise you. But this guide, it's actually the basis for laws and policies about lab animal care.
Yeah, internationally, not just here.
Not just here. The reach of this thing is incredible.
It really is. It's a testament to its impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a lot of that influence, it comes from how the guide goes beyond the basics, right? It's not just don't let the animals freeze or starve. It's deeper than that.
It's about real animal welfare.
Exactly. It really digs into it with this core principle of the 3 R's.
The 3 R's, right.
Replacement, reduction, and refinement.
Okay, yeah, I've definitely heard of those, but a little refresher never hurts.
Sure, of course. So replacement, it's all about are there ways to avoid using animals altogether? Whenever possible, of course.
Right.
Think, computer models, cell cultures, those kinds of alternatives.
It makes sense. If you can use an alternative, that benefits everyone. So what about reduction?
So reduction is all about minimizing the number of animals used in research, right?
Makes sense.
It's about finding that sweet spot, how can we use just enough to get data that's statistically sound?
Yeah.
But never, ever more than absolutely necessary.
Right. Waste not, want not, especially when it comes to, living beings.
Exactly.
Okay, so replacement, reduction, we got those down. What about that final R?
Refinement. Now, this is where the guide gets into the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
It goes beyond just the bare minimum, and it's about always finding ways to improve the lives of these animals in the lab environment.
I like it.
Minimizing any pain, stress, distress they might experience, that's absolutely paramount.
So give me an example. What kind of guidance does the guide offer to make that refinement happen?
Okay, so one big one is this concept of humane endpoints. And we're not just talking about when an animal, unfortunately, passes away during a study.
Right.
We're talking about when they experience a certain level of suffering that just requires immediate intervention to prevent further suffering.
So you're saying intervening, even if it means ending that part of the research early?
Exactly. And that intervention, it could be a lot of things, right? It could be administering pain medication, changing their living conditions, or, sometimes ending that phase of the study.
Wow.
But the point is, you're constantly evaluating, adjusting based on the animal's well-being.
Being proactive, you're saying.
Being proactive and responsive.
Got it. Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So what are some other like concrete things the guide says to like minimize potential harm to the animals?
Oh, it's incredibly thorough. It gets into everything. Like, take multiple surgeries, for example.
Okay.
The guide, it takes a really firm stance on this, like multiple surgeries on the same animal, only okay if they are absolutely 100% crucial to a single research project. And they have to be justified scientifically, not just because it's, convenient for the researchers.
Right.
No bouncing animals between different unrelated studies,
It's about weighing the potential benefits against the potential suffering.
Exactly, exactly. And you know what? It even gets into things like the chemicals used in these studies.
Really?
Yeah. If a researcher wants to use something that's not pharmaceutical grade, like, hold on, we got to scrutinize that.
Oh, interesting. So what's the concern there? Is it just like purity of the chemicals?
That's definitely part of it. But it's bigger than that, you see. Non-pharmaceutical grade stuff, it can have different pH levels. It might be absorbed differently. It could even have like unexpected side effects.
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought of that.
And all of that, it could totally mess up a study's results, not to mention potentially harming the animals.
So the guide's basically saying, hey, researchers, if you're going to use something, you better be sure you know exactly what it is.
Right. Where it came from, how it might affect these animals.
Exactly.
And that meticulous attention to detail, that commitment to minimizing harm, it's in every single aspect of this guide. Everything.
Wow.
From the social dynamics of these animals to the very air they breathe, it's covered.
Hold on. The air they breathe.
Oh, yeah.
Now we're getting into it. You're telling me even something as basic as air quality in the lab is like strictly regulated.
You bet. And the impact that all these environmental factors can have on animal welfare and on the research itself, it's pretty mind-blowing, honestly. It really is. Like, it's all connected in ways we just don't think about,
Give me an example. Give me an example.
Okay, so think about this. Temperature,
Okay.
humidity, ventilation, even like the noise levels in the lab.
Oh, interesting.
All of that can massively impact an animal's, like, whole physiology.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Like if I'm too hot, I get all cranky, can't focus if there's like construction outside my window.
Right, exactly. Now imagine you're a mouse in a lab setting dealing with all these like environmental fluctuations all the time.
Oh, man.
Stress, right?
Yeah.
And that stress, it can really mess with the results of any research. I mean, from drug trials to like complex behavioral studies.
Right. So you got to create the most stable environment possible.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's not just about like being ethical, it's about good science,
It all ties together.
It really does. And the detail in this guide, it's amazing. You might think, okay, just maintain a certain temperature, like within a range.
Yeah.
But it goes deeper than that. It explains how even tiny variations can have big consequences.
So like a few degrees too cold and suddenly your lab rat's like immune system is compromised, more susceptible to getting sick.
Exactly. And that could derail a whole study, right? Waste of time, waste of resources, could even impact like research that people are counting on down the line.
Yeah, no one wants that.
And it doesn't stop there, like ventilation.
Okay.
It's super important. You know how often those cages get cleaned? It directly affects the animal's environment, right?
You know what? I have to admit, I have never once in my life thought about the cleaning schedule for lab animal cages.
Right.
Right. But knowing me, probably more often than I clean my apartment, just saying.
Well, it depends on the cage. Some have those fancy built-in ventilation systems.
Oh, fancy.
Which means you don't have to clean as often. But for those static cages, like the basic ones, just a filter on top.
Okay.
The guide, it's really strict about frequent cleaning to prevent, you guessed it, ammonia buildup from urine.
Oh, yeah, that's a real thing.
It's a real thing. Not pleasant for anyone involved.
No.
So yeah, the guide's got you back on that. Then there's lighting.
Lighting.
Oh yeah, another thing people don't think about, but so crucial.
Really? So it's not just bright or dim. It's like, what kind of light are we talking here?
Exactly. It's about intensity, color spectrum, the whole 9 yards.
So like some animals might need like UV light or something, while others, it could really harm them.
You got it. And remember that whole thing about light intensity varying so much in those rodent cages?
Yeah, crazy, right?
The guide, it actually tells researchers to rotate the cages on those racks regularly so the animals get more even light.
Wow, they really have thought of everything, haven't they? Okay, what about noise, though? Like in the lab, is that addressed?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, because what we hear as a quiet lab could be like a symphony of stress for these animals. They hear way more than us, different frequencies.
So that, like, little humming from a piece of equipment that we barely notice could be driving them nuts.
Exactly. And that's why the guide, it really pushes researchers to be aware of all the noise their equipment's making.
Right.
And to, like, try and minimize it, no unnecessary noise pollution.
I am learning so much today. This is fascinating. I never thought about lab animal care like this. It's like a whole world.
It really is. And it's all, it's all connected, for instance, to cages themselves.
Oh, okay. Right.
For guides got all these details about cage size, the design, all based on the specific needs of different species.
Right. So a hamster who likes to burrow, totally different setup than like a snake who wants to climb.
Exactly. They factor in the species, the age of the animal, if they're alone or in a group, even their like natural behaviors.
Wow.
To figure out the best housing, like the minimum floor space, the cage height, even the type of flooring they use.
So even if a cage is like technically the right size, it might not be a good fit for that particular animal.
Right. And those wire man cages, you've probably seen pictures.
Oh yeah, the classic one.
Well, the guide, it actually says that solid bottom cages with bedding, they're usually better for rodents, more comfy for the little paws.
Oh, that makes sense.
And it lets them do their natural thing, like digging and burrowing.
I never would have thought of that. It's those little things.
Right. It all goes back to that idea of refinement. We got to make the best possible living conditions for these animals. Even if you're using the absolute minimum number, you have a duty to make their lives as good as possible, as stress-free as possible.
Right, both for the animals and for good science.
Exactly.
So the guide, it gets into like all the less obvious stuff too, right? Like their social lives, if they can act like their species normally, all that.
Absolutely, and really recognizes that these are individuals, with complex needs,
Right.
not just research subjects. And that goes way beyond just the physical cage. It talks about social housing, their food, even like the bedding, because all of that can really affect their well-being.
Sounds like a lot to cover.
It is, but it's important. So social housing, right? Some animals, they're naturally social butterflies.
Right.
While others, they just want to be left alone.
Total homebodies.
Exactly.
Right.
And the guide gets that. It says that for many species, being housed socially isn't just like a bonus. It's absolutely crucial for them.
Okay. How so?
Well, it can reduce their stress levels, let them have normal social interactions, even boost their immune system. Being alone would be like solitary confinement for us.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, it's not good, but you can't just like throw a bunch of random animals together and hope for the best.
Right.
The guide is clear. You got to introduce them carefully, watch for any signs of like, hey, these two, not going to work,
Yeah.
and be ready to step in.
It's like animal matchmaking.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And just like with us, a compatible pairing, happier, healthier life all around.
That makes sense.
And the guide, it even talks about the risks of a bad pairing. It's not just like fights breaking out. It's about disease spreading too.
Oh, right. Because if one gets sick, it could spread to the whole group really fast.
Exactly, which is why all that careful monitoring, the quarantine procedures, it's crucial.
Speaking of crucial, we got to talk about food.
Right.
Because I imagine the guide has a lot to say about making sure these animals are properly fed.
Oh yeah, it's all about that species-appropriate diet. They need the right nutrients, the right balance, all tailored to them.
So no feeding the lab rats cat food, no matter how tempting.
Definitely not. But it's more than just the type of food. The guide even talks about how to store it properly so it doesn't go bad, how to prevent them from not getting the right nutrients, even how to give them the food in a way that lets them, act like they would in the wild.
Wait, hold on. Foraging behaviors in a lab, what does that even look like? Like, don't they just get a bowl of pellets?
That's the usual way, but the guide, it encourages researchers to think outside the box a little bit.
Okay.
Like scatter food in the bedding for rodents, for example.
Oh, that's smart.
Or use puzzle feeders for primates, keeps their minds and bodies active.
Right, so it's not just about filling their stomachs, it's about, like, engaging them.
Exactly. And guess what? It all comes back to animal welfare, A&D, better research. Because a stressed, hungry animal not going to give you reliable data.
Makes total sense.
Right. So the guide, it even gets into this whole thing about bedding material.
Wait, the bedding?
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is there to say about bedding? I figured it's all pretty much the same.
Oh, you'd be surprised. It's not just about giving them a comfy place to sleep. Different bedding materials can actually affect their immune systems, their behavior,
Yeah.
even mess with the results of studies.
Seriously, I had no idea.
It's true. For example, you know how they often use wood shavings?
Yeah.
Well, some types of wood, they release these chemicals that interfere with how certain animals process drugs.
Oh, really? So they could be getting inaccurate results and not even know it.
Exactly. Crazy, right?
That is wild.
It just shows you how every little detail is connected when it comes to animal welfare and doing good science.
Wow.
You got to look at the whole picture.
Absolutely got to look at the whole picture. Okay, so we've covered a ton of ground here. Any other, like, really specific examples from the guide that stand out to you? Like, things that are surprising or particularly interesting?
You know, one that always gets people talking is the part about toe clipping in rodents.
Toe clipping, what is that and why do they do it?
It's how they identify individual animals,
Yeah.
especially when they're super tiny, like too small for ear tags. Right. But the guide is really clear. Toe clipping, last resort.
Okay.
Only if there's literally no other way to identify them. You can't just do it because it's easy.
Wow, that's good to know. They're really committed to minimizing harm, even for procedures that might seem, routine.
Absolutely. And that commitment, it's everywhere. Like even down to how they handle new animals arriving at the lab.
What do you mean?
Quarantine and acclimation, just like when we travel to some countries.
Oh, right.
So when new animals show up, they're kept away from all the other animals for a while, make sure they don't have any sneaky diseases.
Makes sense. Keeps everyone safe.
Right. It protects the newcomers and the animals already living there.
Smart.
And the acclimation period, super important too. New animals get time to, like, chill out, get used to their new digs.
So they're not just, like, thrown in a cage and immediately poked and prodded.
No. They get time to settle in. Much more humane.
I like that.
Yeah. Minimizing stress, letting them transition smoothly.
But it's all about the little things,
It really is. It all adds up.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. I had no clue how much goes into lab animal care. It's like a whole science in itself.
It really is. You're creating a whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
One that supports their, physical and mental well-being. And in the end, that helps the research too.
Yeah, it all comes back around.
Right. And speaking of that ecosystem, a big part of it is, well, us.
You mean the people who work with the animals?
Yep. That's another thing the guide is big on, training. And not just for the scientists doing the experiments.
Right.
Everyone who interacts with those animals needs to be trained properly. Animal welfare, handling, the works.
So someone who just cleans the cages still needs to know all that.
Yep. Everyone who steps foot in that lab, no matter what their job is, they can impact those animals' lives.
That's impressive.
Right. It shows they're serious about creating a culture of care in that whole facility. It's really a holistic approach.
Very cool. So it's not just about rules and regulations. It's about, like, changing the whole mindset.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that every single detail matters, from the light bulbs you use to how you train your staff. And it's always evolving, always improving, always based on, doing the right thing for these animals.
It's really something, to see how much emphasis they put on creating that culture of care. Like, it's not just talk. They're really trying to get this right.
They are. And it shows you this guide. It's not just some, like, dusty old rule book. It's a living document, It reflects how much people care about treating these animals right. And that benefits everyone.
Absolutely. It's like a good reminder that, like, scientific progress, it shouldn't come at the expense of animal welfare. The two go hand in hand.
They do. They're interconnected, not opposed. And even though this guide is incredibly thorough, we've just scratched the surface.
Oh, right.
There's always more to learn, always ways to do better. That's what's so cool about science. It never stands still.
Makes you wonder, like, what are the big questions researchers are dealing with right now? What are the things we're still trying to figure out, when it comes to animal care?
Oh, that's a great question. And it actually leads us to something like a really thought-provoking point, something the guide itself doesn't explicitly say. It's something we should all think about, especially folks involved in research.
Okay, now you've got me curious. What is it? What's the big question?
So we spent a lot of time focusing on the things we can easily measure, right? Cage size, temperature, all that good stuff.
Right, the concrete detail.
Exactly. But could it be that in doing that, we're kind of missing some of the bigger picture stuff?
Yeah.
The stuff that's not so easily measured.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like, we could tick all the boxes on a checklist and still be missing something crucial about how the animal's actually feeling.
Exactly. Things like, how stressed are they, really? Are they able to, act like they would in the wild?
Yeah.
Even their sense of, like, security, safety, that's not something you can measure with a thermometer.
But
it matters a lot. And that's why we can't just rely on numbers and checklists. We have to constantly be observing, researching, questioning what we're doing, and be open to changing things up.
It's about remembering that these are like living, feeling beings, not just subjects in a study. Their well-being, it's connected to ours in a very real way.
Couldn't have said it better myself, and that's what I hope people take away from this, how we treat these animals. It says a lot about us as a society. It shows our commitment to ethical research, to recognizing that as we pursue knowledge, we got to do it with compassion and respect for these animals.
Really powerful stuff, this deep dive into the guide for the care and use of laboratory animals. It's been amazing, honestly. I've learned so much, and it's made me think about all this in a whole new way.
That's fantastic to hear. It's a fascinating field, always pushing forward.
And for everyone listening, don't stop here. Keep learning about these amazing animals, the role they play in research, and how we can make sure they're treated with the care and respect they deserve. It's on all of us.